My name is Willem Overwater. I'm Dutch born, and I'm going to share with you my road in leadership. I'll tell you about, how I started and where I came. I will tell you a little bit about the changes I felt necessary to make, and I will tell you about the lessons learned for me. Well, the topic tonight, we gave a title, and the title is Profit or People. Now tell me, if you would qualify a company and look at its success, where would you look at? Would you look at the profit, or would you look at people? Now, give me a show of hands. Who would look at profit? Okay, yeah, quite normal. And who would look at people? Okay, well, they're minority, so the profit is still the majority. And I think that is also what it is in real life. But majority will look at profit. So that's a financial term. Right. Now this is me. About 58 years ago, I was born in a Christian family, and my father was the chairman of a publicly listed company, and my mother took care of us, me and my older and younger brother. I studied law, and I got married. And from my marriage, also 5 children were born. And you'll see, oh yeah, I graduated also in the meantime. And you see on the picture there are 4 children. Our 5th is gone ahead of us to Jesus, so she's no longer on this earth. But she's still mentioned. I joined NMB, and they said ING, yes, that's true, but I joined in that time NMB. That was a bank for the mid-sized companies in the Netherlands. And of course, it changed its name sometime later to ING Bank. And maybe some of you remember ING Bearings. It has been some time. And then it changed back. Anyway, I was studied as a student in law, so I graduated in law as a lawyer. And I joined a bank, so I didn't know anything about finance. And I had to learn quite fast, in about a year time, what finance was about. And after that year, the company sent me out to Singapore. And they gave me the message, okay, build some business. Now, I was still a kind of a meatball or meatloaf. And I didn't have a clue on what to do. So luckily I had a few good colleagues who basically get me going in the market. And I tried to set up a Dutch desk. Those days that was very famous. But that didn't work, so I created European desk. That didn't work either. So at the end of the day, I built a portfolio of Indonesian and Thai clients for our Singapore business. So the head office was happy, and they sent me out to Sao Paulo in about 2.5 years later. That was a market with 1.5% of inflation per day. That calculates about 1,200% per year. So you can imagine that lending and borrowing was really an uphill battle. So ING and also Citibank, we were very good. We invented a new market, let's say, what we call the asset trading market. The market is now completely gone, but in those days it was big. And what it meant was like you would buy international debt of Brazil, and you would give it to a client, and the client goes to the central bank, and he gives the international debt back to the central bank, and receives 100% local currency. Now, if you know that we bought this debt for 30%, you can see that the clients could make a huge investment gain, and the bank as well. So everybody was very happy what we did, and we'd made a lot of profit. And after 3 years, I was sent out to Indonesia, where we basically had just started a joint venture bank, and I was asked to build their business. So I did. We studied the market, and we started with a structured trade finance and a structured finance business. A little bit more complicated than straightforward lending, but a lot of fun and a big market. So again, there the business grew very fast. Again, head office very, very happy, and they sent me out to Prague, and they said, "Okay, you're deputy general manager there, and you're responsible for the whole commercial activity of ING in the country." Now, of course, I was very proud, and it was not an easy market, the Czech market. But there again, we found a niche for ourselves, and we went into the local bond market and were successful again. So, after 2.5 years again, sent out to Sofia and to become the CEO of the country, leading the bank and the insurance company. That was also a real good time. After some time, when our kids were grown up and they went to study, we left and we went back to Amsterdam. Now, this is in a nutshell about 2/3 of my career. And if you look at it, it was considered very successful. Everybody was, looking at me and saying, "Okay, well done." But at the same time, the question for me was I that happy? Outside, yes, of course. I had a nice family, I had a great salary, I had beautiful housing, everything looked like, a golden path. But inside, I was feeling pretty empty and lonely, and maybe you should say unfulfilled. And that was not a feeling I was always there, but when I was busy and I was doing a transaction, that feeling kind of left me. But when it was a bit more quiet, the feeling came back. And then at that point in time, I realized something which was said to me a long time ago by my father when he read out of the Bible. He quoted Jesus saying, "What good does it a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his own soul?" Now, that kind of hit me at that time. I was starting to think by myself, where did I miss a turn? Because I had given up part of my values, and I needed to start looking at myself. And when I looked at myself, basically I said to myself, okay, when I started my career with serving the client. That is what we always start with. We see the need and we go for it. And then we find a product that is the means of service of that client. And then, at the end, of course, there is a result for ourselves, a profit. But when I was really honest to myself, it kind of changed in the profit had become the purpose. And the client actually became the means for my profit. And the product and the people were the cost to my product. So the world had come upside down. That said something about my identity. My identity basically was built on my financial success, the reputation I built with it, because I could go anywhere within ING and they knew my name, and my status. I was the CEO. So these three things basically determined, at that point in time, I must have been somewhere between 43, 44, what I actually was and was acting out. And if you think this through, the next step of this path was actually going from financial success to greed, and going from reputation to becoming very selfish, and coming from status to being very arrogant. And I said to myself, no, that's not the way I want to go. Because somewhere in that whole path, I'm losing my soul. So I basically soul searched myself again and said, okay, where did you miss a turn? And what do you need to do now? Basically, what I have to do is to reinvent my identity and redefine it. You might say, well, what does it mean? Or what value does it have to go back and do soul searching for your business? I think it's a good question. I heard sometime I said a saying by somebody who said, if you do not know where you're going, all roads will bring you there. Think about it. That is so true. So basically, all decisions, if you say it the other way around, all decisions need actually an anchor. And need an anchor to be sustainable and to be purposeful. So what is my anchor? Because otherwise, all roads will lead me nowhere. So my inspiration, as I told you, was Christian raised. It wouldn't surprise you, is from the Bible. And the three things that for me became very important and basically based myself back in my own life was the first statement: I will be connected. I will not be an island. I will not just think of myself, but I will be with the people around me. And the second thing, I promised myself, I said, I will live for love. Now that's a bit of an odd statement, maybe in business terms, but I'll come back to that. And the third one is, I will live just and peacefully. Now see where I am. Let's go back to, I live in connection. Now, how do you do that? At a certain point in time, I had defined these things that I wanted to live from these principles as my identity. So how do you go about it? How do you live connected? What I did when I went back to the office, and of course that didn't happen in one day, and then the next day I went to the office and did something. That of course took time, but I sent out a questionnaire to all staff. And the basic idea of the questionnaire was to ask them, how do you feel about your position in the company? And the result that I got back from that question basically took me not by surprise, but was a shock. Because the people basically said that they felt like being instruments and not being influential. And if they had a say in it, that they rather be influential than instrumental. So they rather have influence on their own destiny than being part of a big transaction or you name it. So influence was something I needed to be giving as part of my management style to the people. I didn't know how, but I knew that that was the road to go. There was another thing that kind of hit me when I did this questionnaire and talked to the people later on was that everybody speaks from their own background. So there is not just one truth, because the way I look at reality is the way I have learned to look at reality. So do you. And maybe you see something different than I. So I had to find out a way to communicate with people and listen to them, understanding where they came from. So communication is from that angle is pretty difficult. So we have to look at the individual context of people to honor them. Otherwise, you don't see the real people. You basically see instruments of my organization. But if I want to see the real people, I have to know them. I have to know where they come from, who they're married to, who their children are, what is keeping them busy at night. And so that was a challenge because I had 300 people. So how do you go about that? Now, the trick there, luckily, is that if you are aware of it, that's the beginning of the victory. So I had to go and give time, go into the organization without an agenda, and talk to the people and let them talk to me. Anyway, so let's move to the next thing I basically decided to do, and that is to love. Meaning for me is that not my brain, but my heart will be in charge. Now, you say, love and business. I'll give you a quote, and the quote is from Martin Luther King. And that's something that also impressed me a lot. And he said, power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. So he basically said they both need to go together. So in a business, if you are in a position of power and you don't have love, you end up being reckless or maybe abusive. And if you are only in love and you don't have the power, you can't do business. So how did I translate this into business? Basically stating that I will not go for the high profit, but I will go for the best deal for my client. I was normally not inclined to do that because being a financial man as I am, I could see where profits were 10 times quicker than our clients could. So we had sold already a certain product even before he, woke up. And I decided never to do that again. So basically going for the need of the client, finding the right product, and try to sell that to him. That's the first thing. Another thing, example of this was, I will not transact a super gain if that will be at the cost of many. So yes, I have had a few times that I declined to be part of a transaction because a couple of shareholders thought that they could corner the market and basically take profit out of the pocket of small investors. Of course, at the same time, I had to take care of my shareholders. So I had to be sure that the people who would put money into my activity were also rewarded. That's part of the game. So they will not be neglected, but they're not the only one. So then the last one is basically be just and peaceful. Now for me that was maybe the most difficult one. Because being just means that you have to decide. You have to show your colors, so to say. Because in a position of power, of a CEO, you have many decisions to make, most of them quite easy, but some of them quite difficult because people are involved. Maybe quarrels between my own staff or between staff and a client or between even clients. And my natural style was to let it go. Let time decide. That's what I said. I thought it was a beautiful sentence. But actually, I was basically abdicating my responsibility. Because as a CEO in that position with the power, it was up to me to make the decision. And I found out in time that I was not so afraid of making that decision, but I was really afraid of hurting, of seeing pain. That's something I really have difficulty with. I rather turn around. And I had to learn that I had to take a decision and cause pain for one of the parties, because one of the parties would not get his right, or not get, I would go the other way. And for me was to learn to be with that pain and to be available to that person, even with that pain. So, these were, for me, quite difficult, but really, really healthy exercises. And with being just and peaceful, you're basically starting to circle around. Because you're going to balance the interests of all the parties involved. All the stakeholders involved are basically part of what is happening. Now, what did it do to my company's identity? Because I have been talking to my identity, but the interesting thing is that it doesn't stop there. One of the lessons I have, I come back to that at the end, is that when a CEO is starting to change his behavior, everybody will see it. You think that nobody sees, but everybody sees it. And the moment I started to change my behavior, we had real conversations. Meaning that, people dare to say what they really thought. And that is very helpful. That is actually the best thing that can happen. Because together we started to define the identity of our company. What do we really want to be? And I recall there was a big financial crisis somewhere between 2007-08 until 2015. And I'm very proud that our team, we decided that we would be a trustworthy bank. And that they wanted to go out with that message to our clients. Now, that was not a well-received message, I can tell you. Because the first time we told them, they basically kicked them out of their offices or something. But because we were genuine, it was really because we felt from inside that we wanted to do that. That slowly but surely, our clients believed what we said. And what happened because of that, and of course not the first time around, but in actually years after that, the satisfaction of our clients started to rise very sharply. So sharp that our head office started to wonder why our client satisfaction, they actually thought that we were kind of tweaking the figures, which we were not, but they were becoming interested what happened. So we had very interesting discussions I had with my bosses in Amsterdam. And employees were happy. They were very happy, and because they were engaged, they could also influence their own destiny, and they felt proud of what they were doing. And then what happened? Income and profits, they did increase. Now you can say maybe didn't increase to the maximum. Maybe not. But they increased well enough for our shareholders to be happy. Quite happy. And for me it was not a surprise because I was kind of moving into that direction from one year to the other. But I started to be grateful that this is happening. So, What I've learned over the last, now let's say 10 years, 15 years maybe, is one thing. Companies need inspired leaders to develop identity. I can't repeat it. Everywhere I go from my coaching activities, one of the things I always start with is say, okay, how inspired are you? What's your motivation? Because I think that companies can really mean a change to society. It can be small, it can be big. I'll give you one example. A grocer shop in a small village in Holland did not do too well. Then the owner basically started to look around in his village and see what was happening, and he saw that the people were growing fat. And he thought by himself, what if I'm going to help my clients, because all the village was kind of client with him, to fight obesitas. And he really felt for it, and he started to redefine the identity of his grocery into a health shop. And the whole village went with him and helped him. So it was really beautiful to see. So I really believe that companies can change their environment. The second thing I learned is your company, my company, identity gives you the edge to the market. Selling to a price, everybody can do that. But if you really have an identity to solve an issue with your client, or to help him to prepare, get a better life, your client, your village, your city, then you have an edge to the market. Somewhere I read from Paul Polman, he was the former CEO of Unilever. He said the founder of Lever Brothers, which was a UK company, didn't start selling soap because he wanted to have profit. He started selling soap because there was a need of hygiene. Yeah. Investments in people, because that's what it all boils down to. If you build an identity, you really have to spend time with your people and train them, but it gives you the best long return. That's what I learned. And last but not least, that's my conviction now, that profit is proof of sustainability. Of course you need profit. Of course you need a return on an investment. But it's not the purpose of your company. It cannot be. It is just the proof that your company is giving a valued product to its clients. Thank you very much.
Добре, а зараз є можливість задати питання нашому спікеру, якщо у вас є. Будь ласка.
One question, please. Maybe you talk about more success companies, our life. Success company, our life, more success, your life. What's company? Project, yeah.
Which company I worked for?
Yeah.
I worked for ING all my life. And my own company now. So, but I've been in 6 different countries, there's 6 different businesses of ING.
And what is success more and enough company?
Oh, I don't get that point, I think.
Okay, what is company more success than enough company? Да. Яка компанія найбільш вдала з його прикладів чи навів?
З тих прикладів. So, out of the companies that you have named here, which one, to your mind, was the most successful?
That's, Yeah, then you go by success. What is the value of success? I've seen a couple of companies that are really successful when you talk about identity. I told you already, Unilever. The last 15 years, they had Paul Polman as their chairman. And Paul was really dedicated to, Paul Polman actually wanted to be a priest or a doctor when he was young. And both he couldn't become. And then finally he went into business, he went to Procter & Gamble and Nestle, and finally he ended up with Unilever. And he was completely convinced that the company needed to take care not just for the profits and their shareholders, but also to be a good citizen, to protect nature, to develop its staff, and that their products always needed to have a value just beyond making a profit. He said something like, if you sell toilet cleaners in a market that doesn't have toilets, so what are you going for? You're probably going to invest also in people's hygiene. So it's in your heart to do that. It's not like, I want to make money and I'm going to sell a product. It's like, I want to solve something that is needed in society. So that's the client need. And that's what I'm going to do. That is my motivation. And that result also in a return for the people who invest in this activity, that's fine, but that never can be the purpose. So I think Unilever has done quite well in the recent years, but they had also some problems because some of their shareholders didn't believe them. And he's a public company, so he got kind of a fight also. They tried to buy his company, or that company, Unilever. It's big. It's like tens of billions of euros. And he got Soros against him at a certain point. So, yeah, but I think that's very good. A company that really lives out of identity was maybe, what is the company name? The iPhone? For sure. That's a company that really tried to develop a need for their clients, not so much to make a profit. They were very profitable at the end, but they started with their identity as being the company that is going to solve this communication issue, and they came with the iPod first, and then with the iPhone, and so they developed that market based on the need of their clients. So they were very much in their identity, and if you read books about that, you can also see that the identity of that company was very much with their clients. Yeah, very successful company. And there are many more. There are also very small companies that are very successful. The one grocer I talked to you about, he is very successful in his means. I mean, he's not big, but and it's just a family business, but he's doing very well. And I like to see both. I'm not so much in the big companies. I'm more in the middle-sized companies. And there are many who are, and there are also many companies that are looking for their identity. They're not used to do that. They basically just made a product and they're stuck into their development on how do I get to my next product, or, and they tend to be too late because, they lack identity. They're just making screws. And say, okay, what do you do that for? Why do you like that? The question you should maybe ask yourself in companies is like, what would my client miss if I was not here? And if your answer is he goes to the competition, then you better stop. Is that a good enough answer? Yeah?
Ще якісь питання будуть? Будь ласка.
Добрий вечір. Ян, насамперед хочемо вас дуже подякувати за ваш виступ, за ваш візит. Дуже надихає ваш приклад. Якщо можна, як ви шукаєте клієнтів, як клієнти шукають вас, з якими проблемами до вас звертаються клієнти?
First of all, we'd like to thank you for your visit and your presentation. But the question is, how do you look for clients, and how do clients seek out you, and what do they expect from you?
All right. Well, good. Good question. About a year ago, I asked me the same question: how do I get my clients? I don't say that goes by itself. Certainly not. And there is a personal story with this, because I started a commercial company last year, and 3 years ago I had a heart attack, and I luckily survived. And this summer I kind of felt again that, you know, I was being too rushy and too commercial. And because if you are in a commercial transaction with a client, then, you know, they expect me to deliver. And of course, rightfully so. So I had to decide this summer to stop my commercial activity and only go for non-profit. So I will not ask for a profit. And so I have the time on my side. And so I will get my clients from, you know, word by mouth. And so one client says, hey, maybe you should talk to him, or you should talk to him. And I can say yes or no. Sometimes my expertise is not the right expertise. I'm very much into organization and cultural change. And sometimes a company is in a different position. Because I think also companies have different stages of developing their own identity, their consciousness. The first consciousness of a company is survival, like from everybody else in our individual life as well. If you're born, you need to survive. So you have to make yourself a sustainable and also profitable business, and that's hard work. You know, if I then start talking to you about how about your personnel and how about your identity, you know, you don't even have time to think about it. So then I would come with the wrong signals and the wrong coaching at the wrong time, right? So then they need somebody who is, you know, in building small businesses and getting support. So, you know, it just goes by itself. And yeah, not completely by itself. You have to do something for it, of course. But yeah, that's the way. Is that sufficient answer to you? Okay. Thank you.
Ще хтось мав ручку.
Thank you, Jan, for a good story and value story. And I'd like to ask you, what was the most difficult thing when you refined your identity and build your new corporate culture in your company? What was the most difficult things? And maybe you give some tips. Did you have some educational programs, or how did you do that?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. The most difficult thing for me was doing it. Just getting behind, you know, getting out of my chair and telling the people that I like to do things differently. Just basically to tell this story. Now I can tell this story quite easily, but 10 years ago, this story for me was difficult to tell. Like, you know, not wasted, but I had lived my life in a rush and not taking care of other people. And to me that, you know, still it hurts me if I talk about that. And so go up and stand in front of your people, or at least starting with your management team and starting to tell that story like, hey, I personally am not happy. I thought everybody would get depressed if I would say that, you know. Oh, the boss is not happy, so what's happening, you know? So to get that story across, that, you know, I was fine, you know, but I wasn't satisfied, that was probably the most difficult to start with. I didn't know how to start, let's say. But the moment you started, then you get so, I mean, I got so much positive response, like, wow, oh, wow, so happy that you're telling me this, because, and then people start telling their own story. So the whole thing is, as a CEO, it's just opening the door and saying, okay, it's fine to tell who you really are. You don't have to pretend. You know, you don't have to jump the bar. It's okay to be yourself. And you're good enough as you are. And together, we can organize it. So that was for me the most difficult thing.
Ще я бачив хтось.
Перекласти зможете? Investments in people – це дуже таке широке поняття. Чи можете ви трошки конкретизувати, що ви маєте на увазі? Не тільки там знати, як кого звуть, чи когось жінку, чи ходити там кожен тиждень у боулінг. Ну, чи що конкретно мається на увазі під інвестуванням в людей?
Investments in people is a very broad concept. Could you bring more specifics to it? I mean, it's one thing to say, well, to learn the names of the people or go to bowling alley every week. But what do you specifically do to invest in people?
All right. I think there are two things here. One is personal, and the other one is professional. The personal thing is, that's the way I did it, is to go out and talk to people, to be on the floor without an agenda, and to make sure that they understand that they are important, that I'm happy that they're working with ING. That's one thing. That's my time invested in people. So there is then becomes a bonding between me and them, or between them and me. So we start feeling real colleagues, and you know, you really have a atmosphere. Basically, it's also for me stepping down, you know, not being the CEO, but just being Jan Willem, and talk about normal life and a football game and that type of thing. The second thing professionally is that investing in people, we tend to invest in people. That was what happened to me. ING invested a lot in me, but basically to do a job, to become a financier and to understand what a balance sheet is about and to know the markets and all the tricks and stuff. So that's a technical training. But I think that it's not right, because that would lock the people to that particular job. And I think we should invest in people, and that's what I've done in the last 15 years, to develop people in its full-fledged possibilities. So not so much for the job, but for employability. So I can tell you, my secretary at a certain point in time came to me and said, I'd like to do a seminar in colors. Colors? What's that? And then she basically told me that after that she was secretary, didn't want to do that for the whole of her life. She would do something in ladies, was it fashion? And then do something like, you know, in a shop of giving people the right colors, and then saying, okay, this is a nice color for you and this is a nice color for you. And I thought to myself, yeah, why not? So I gave her, you know, the signature and saying, okay, go ahead, develop. Develop yourself. Nothing to do with the bank, but, you know, it has to do with you personally and with your desires and the things you want to develop. And I think companies should be giving the opportunity to the staff to develop further than just, you know, the job they're doing. And then many more things. You know, I've did training programs with the staff. I went through all kinds of years after year after year, because it's something that you really have to keep on work on. It's not something like, okay, we change culture at 4:15 on Friday. You know, it doesn't work. So it takes really years to make that happen. Yeah, and a couple of books I can recommend you. Really, really good in, you know, getting it started.
Ще питання?
Большое спасибо за вашу историю. Я в своем личном бизнесе работаю 8 лет, и были разные периоды, и опыт местами очень похож на ваш опыт.
So I have owned the business for 8 years, and I have had different experiences. In some parts, it resembles what you have experienced.
И на данный момент, наверное, 1,5 года назад я пришел в такую же точку, когда я понял, что нужно строить, вести бизнес таким образом, чтобы все стороны, это получается и инвесторы, и сотрудники, и клиенты были довольны в каком-то балансе, да, чтобы это было хорошее качество обслуживания продукта, это чтобы была высокая прибыль и, естественно, чтобы было вознаграждение финансовое и рост, возможности роста внутри компании для сотрудников.
And about 1.5 years ago, I came to the conclusion that yes, I need to invest into all stakeholders so that all stakeholders would be happy. The investors, the employers, the clients, so would have a very good service to the clients. At the same time, a very good development opportunities for the employees.
Значит, однажды я побывал на встрече в одной американской компании, которая, в общем-то, рассказывала историю, в принципе, которая отвечала всем этим запросам. Но проблема была в том, что из 100, вернее, присутствующих на той встрече предпринимателей, я предполагаю, что, exciting, это как, восторг продолжался, возможно, у них неделю, и попытка что-то изменить на их предприятиях, но через неделю все попытки закончились по причине неопытности, невозможности внедрения это все в практику.
Okay, well, anyway, it's too late.
Okay, and once I was at a presentation by an American company that spoke about all these things that you speak of, and there were about 100 entrepreneurs there, business owners, and I would say that their excitement about all of this lasted for about a week after the meeting, and maybe these things they tried to implement fell through within a week simply because they didn't have right opportunities or tools or things at their disposal.
По моей субъективной оценке, я думаю, из 100 присутствующих предпринимателей, возможно, 5% смогли внедрить в своих компаниях то, о чем им говорилось. Хорошо. Я для себя тоже сделал попытку что-то изменить, но я как бы не смог осуществить это, я не нашел инструментов внедрения для того, чтобы культура в компании начала меняться. То есть у меня было вдохновение, я понимал, что да, нужно помогать всем, нужно, чтобы все стали счастливы, но как это внедрить на практике оказалось очень сложным, да? Потому что есть определенные процессы, которые системно идут, и изменить их очень сложно. Для себя я сделал в конце концов после неудачных попыток внедрения, вывод, что мне нужно поехать в какую-то компанию зарубежную, западную, потому что примеров позитивных я не нашел на постсоветском пространстве, даже среди христианских компаний, так называемых, да. Принял решение, что просто мне нужно, скорее всего, поехать за границу, найти похожую компанию и попросить просто присутствовать там неделю, может быть, месяц, наблюдая за тем, как они внедряют каждый из этих процессов шаг за шагом, для того, чтобы я потом мог это применить у себя. Что вы посоветуете? Потому что у меня есть желание это сделать, но нет практического опыта, я не вижу практического опыта, как внедрить это все. Но желание есть очень большое.
Okay. Thank you. Beautiful question. I cannot just give a recommendation just like that. First of all, I think very important. Why only 5% of the 100 people were able to follow up on changes or on identity? First of all, it has to be really from inside. Because if you think it's a beautiful story and then you take, some paint and you're going to paint your company, it's not from inside. If you understand the parallel, it's not a varnish. It's really from an inside-out glowing that the company needs to change. And that's one. The second thing, it's a really time-consuming process. So if you do it 1, 2, 3, 4 years, maybe 5, 6, 7 will come. So it's a slow process in very small steps. Then the third thing is really make sure that you know what you want to change. So it start there is like understanding what is the position of development of your company. And now I'm talking about the status of your consciousness. And I said already the first status of consciousness is survival. Now there are 7 in stages. I won't tell them all 7, but there are different stages, and you have to find out, where is my company? Because if you know where your company is, then you know also where you have to start with what type of instrument, what is going on. So first of all, it's time consuming. Don't give up and find out what the stage of your company is and what changes you really want to make. Because changes for changes is not the purpose. It really has to add value, and add value to your clients and to your staff. So if you have very happy staff already and very happy clients, there is probably limited need for change. So, understand what I'm saying? That's all I can say right now. I mean, we should maybe talk further and understand what your company is all about. Yeah.
And since I'm MC, I'm going to use one more my time to ask you a question. Quick question.
Yes, sure.
Opposite to what was asked, actually. What I encounter here in Ukraine quite often is that people are not willing to invest into long-term results because we live in a volatile economy, in an uncertain political situation, and for them 5 years down the line is already too uncertain, too risky to even consider investment. So how would you approach the company that doesn't want to change simply because they don't see any value in that, because they need profit here and right now, and there is no rule of law, so there is no predictability in the country. So this way, people kind of try to stay away from all of these wonderful things, saying it will not work in Ukraine.
Yes, I do understand.
So what would you suggest?
And that's probably also the outcome then, right? The only thing I can suggest is still do it. There is no golden staff or something like, or a quick win of changing the whole country. Because I've been in Bulgaria, so where basically my journey started was in Prague, Bulgaria, and after that Holland. So I know the difficulties of a country that is really trying to grow up, and Bulgaria had lots of problems, political problems. They had the mafia all around. Everybody was hating everybody. In my office, we had Sofia people and Plovdiv people, and they were fighting, and so on and so forth. And I was there for only 6 years, and I started that kind of changing culture. And when I left, I think I was halfway. And maybe when I go back, I find out they stopped, because there's another CEO. It has to be really from the top, from the management, that it has to be driven into the company. It's difficult to do it from upside down, let's say, from under up. So I don't have a real answer to that except for it works if you give it time. And yeah, I think, particularly in countries where there's still a lot of things to do, just one example can change the life of so many people. And forget about the profit for a second, but see how much changing you can bring to people's lives. I mean, that only.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.